So this is going to be a little bit packed, and I'm sorry. So we're just going to try and power through. Is your infrastructure a mess? Let's fix it. First of all, that's my daughter. You're going to see her throughout this. She's 9 months old, and that was last night at dinner while I was here. She loves lasagna, it seems. What we're going to do, we're going to define what a modern infrastructure is, glance at their architectures, demonstrate how to do this yourself, and then the details. So, what is a modern infrastructure? Well, according to me in this case, sorry. It includes centralized logging, monitoring, orchestration, CI, continuous integration, and metrics. We're not actually going to set up a graphite server in this talk just because I didn't have time for all of y'all to go ahead and do it well. So what we'll do today, we're going to set up mCollective, which is orchestration, Sensu, which is a monitoring system that's ideal for cloud infrastructure, Logstash, Elasticsearch, and Kibana. I'm pretty sure they're actually sponsors, so you can probably talk to them too. And then also Jenkins. So mCollective is, I'm using the abbreviation MCO, and actually the command line for it is MCO as well, so you'll see it. It's for orchestration. It's actually maintained by public labs, and it uses ActiveMQ or RabbitMQ as a middleware to do the communication to the nodes. Everything is actually outbound communication, which is really handy because you don't actually have to know your server's names to go ahead and talk to them and control them. And this is actually from the documentation. You can actually see the mCollective. This is the middleware over here. And the administration node is the actual client in mCollective terms. And the systems that run the actual server, what they call the server is actually, in many people's nomenclature, the agent that runs on your servers. They actually have an agent, which is completely different, which is actually things that manage, say, Puppet or packages or things like those. Sensu, which is a distributed monitoring system. It uses RabbitMQ, has a really nice, easy API, and allows you to add and remove servers without restarting or changing config files on the server. It publishes checks to RabbitMQ. So you actually have multiple, you have multiple servers you can run. They all talk to Rabbit, and they store their state in the Redis database, and the APIs are here. So you actually have clients over here, all which talk to Rabbit, and then the servers talk to Rabbit and publish checks. We'll go into more, you'll see some more of this stuff later on. I'm just going to high level with this. Logstash is a centralized logging system. It's, in addition to Kibana and Elasticsearch, might be reminiscent of Splunk. Has some really nice message routing features. And what you see here is the shippers over on the end, I think. Okay, good, there. You don't actually have to use the broker for Redis. We're actually not using that in this. We're actually using the Logstash forwarder, which is, I'll show you a little later. Then you've got an indexer node, and then Elasticsearch for storage and search. And then Kibana is the web interface and a console. Elasticsearch Kibana. Elasticsearch is a distributed RESTful search and analytics tool. It's used as a data store for Logstash. It's not the only one, but one of the most used. Kibana is, as I said, the dashboard for using stuff. You can actually use it without Logstash, so it is useful for other things. It can do really nice and interesting things. And now we're actually going to get to the meat of the stuff. Yes, that is Puppet for Hello World. That was a couple months ago. She doesn't fit in it anymore. What we're actually going to do, show how to use a set of Forge modules to build an infrastructure out. We're actually going to use a module I just uploaded earlier today. It's mbar-modern infra. On the website, however, it's mbar/modern infra. There's a plugin, the discrepancy in how the actual module names are done between the Forge and the module tool. And I'm actually using Librarian Puppet to manage all the modules. Y'all won't if you use the module because I'll update the dependencies, so you won't need to. I actually have as an appendix how I built my Puppet Master and how I set up Librarian Puppet. If we have time, I might show you, just because it's interesting, but we may not have time. This is supposed to be a beginner talk for those of you who are new to this stuff, and so I try to keep it a little easier than going into all the depths of the code. So, I actually built this out in AWS instead of Vagrant. And I built an MQ server, RabbitMQ server plus Sensu, as well as mcollective. It has the mcollective admin role, which is the MCO client. I also built a separate Logstash server and a Jenkins host, in addition to a Puppet Master. Each server also sends logs via Logstash forwarder, runs the Sensu client checks, and runs an MCO server, which means they can respond to requests, similar to basically with what live management does in Puppet Enterprise. So the module itself. The module sets up the basics of each service, sets up the requirements, and this is an opinionated module. Okay? It is not the bare bones module. It has strong opinions as to how things are supposed to work. I'm using SSL this way and that way, it's one of those lines. It does set up users and accounts, and it is really a meta module that is going to do a whole lot of setup that might otherwise be in a profile if you were using rolling profiles. So this is really kind of a way to package up a bunch of profiles and get it out to you to make it a little easier so you don't have to write it yourself. So you can install this on the porch with that. If everyone can't read it, it's just the standard. Can everyone read any of this? I'm using that size font, and it's hard to tell how well you're going to read that 20-point font for code.
Yep.
Okay. So, this is actually, like Sheila was talking about, when you download a module from Forge, this is the actual set of the interaction points. You guys can use this. You really only have to look at this and the documentation to figure out how to use a module. What I got here is actually the list of parameters for the module. I give the RabbitMQ server name, the Logstash server name, and then basically start defining effectively profiles for the system. So RabbitMQ, true or false, client, server, Sensu client, Sensu server, Logstash forwarder, which is actually defined as true, which is the only one that really is turned on by default. Interesting detail. And then also that you set the mcollective password for the pre-shared key that we're using, and then the Sensu password, which is actually a little less secure because it's just the password to talk to the user account at RabbitMQ. I also put up Hyra data for setting the defaults. This could go in, say, your Hyra common file, and if you need to override it, you could almost do everything, pretty much the entire modules work with just Hyra if you use the appropriate hierarchy. Like you had your RabbitMQ server, then you just list the parameter values and be fine. But you may want to keep the actual stuff later for common. So this is just your passwords and your server names. Something to note, you do have to set the RabbitMQ server and the Logstash server names in order to make this module go. If you don't have it, it will fail. Like Sheila said, you'll get an error and you'll be unhappy. You don't actually have to set new passwords. You probably want to. Otherwise, it will just use the defaults that are in the code. It may not be as big of a deal though, because you are probably going to be running this in either with security groups or possibly in AWS or another cloud infrastructure, or you're going to be running in the data center, and you'll have SSL certs that will help cover most of those that are issued by your Puppet Master. This is actually what my site BP is for this code base. I actually set a role as an external fact on each node as it's being built. By the way, I actually included in the code for the document, for the actual entire presentation, Cloud Stack templates that set up all these hosts. So you can actually see how to get done, as well as adding the DNS names and things along those lines. So, but basically you can see up at the top, The mcollective node is going to have going to have the RMQ server on it, so it's going to run the RabbitMQ server. It's going to have mcollective client, and it's going to be a Sensu server, whereas the other nodes typically are not. So this is one node that we're using because it's running. You might separate the RabbitMQ server potentially from Sensu and from mcollective, but in this case, I'm just using it as one node because it's easier that way. So RabbitMQ is a middleware. You can use ActiveMQ for mcollective. I chose to use RabbitMQ because Sensu requires it as well. So that's doing that. I'm actually using a Puppet SSL certs for the connections though. You don't have to have your own independent CA. You don't have to make new certs. You don't have to do anything else. It'll just automatically use the ones on the nodes and then make another cert for the RabbitMQ server. For the RabbitMQ service will get its own cert based on the name you give it. This is the actual code for this node. So you can see we said it runs as the RabbitMQ server, the mcollective's client. It also automatically adds the server at the same time to the same node. That's a bug that we need to eventually fix. But for right now it works. And then the Sensu server. We also have this include profiles Sensu checks, which is really how you might actually end up using this in your world. You'd probably put monitor for class, and then you need to add checks to Sensu to actually make it do anything really useful. It's like Nagios. Once you have the Nagios server up, you have to actually add things to make it do stuff. So we'll show you that too. This is just one of the dashboards for RabbitMQ. Shows all the connections. So you can see I had 4 nodes, 4 of which were running mcollective and 4 connections from Sensu. Actually 5 connections from Sensu. One thing to note, Sensu isn't running with SSL certs. There's a bug in our Lang OTP in Ubuntu 14.04. It didn't work. And so I had to turn it off. I will hopefully be able to patch the bug as soon as the code comes out with 17.1, whenever they manage to get the code updated. mcollective. The typical Puppet Labs mcollective module defaults to a pre-shared key with no SSL. I decided that really wasn't a particularly effective way of doing it for y'all, so you might want to actually have SSLs on the actual connections to RabbitMQ. So I actually set that up. It installs the package, the service, and the Puppet agents, which allow you to manage, similar to like live management stuff, packages, services, and data. And turns out Puppet. And it looks like that when you run the command lines. You can actually see that there were 4 nodes, and that 3 of them had Puppet installed, and 1 didn't. So it actually has the Puppet common on the root 2 as opposed to Puppet, and it's got the Puppet master package as well. So that's what mcollective looks like when you run it on command. There are plenty of other ways. There's also some projects out there for dashboards that are not PE. PE is a really good way to do it instead. It actually uses the same technology. Sensu. I've actually got a client running on all 4 nodes. The server's around RabbitMQ. The dashboard's on AD8. This is what the output. If you have it all working perfectly, you won't actually see anything if your checks are all passing. So I actually introduced some failures, and so I just didn't bother installing a couple of the actual checks on some of the nodes. So that's why you actually see failures here. This is actually a good thing. NTP is failing, and check memory is failing. This is, you can see, actually the list of the clients. They just, as you add one, within a couple of seconds, it just shows up on the dashboard. Really quite amazing. You don't have to do anything on the server to add nodes. They can come up, they can go away. I actually have some code in module, upstream modules for showing how to just automatically on the shutdown of a node in an Amazon, just delete the node from the actual Sensu check. And so if you can use it for auto scaling and things like that without having to go ahead and modify your configs every 5 seconds as you auto scale. And this is just a list of the checks that were installed on Sensu, which are published out to the actual systems. So the systems don't have to know about the checks, they just have to have the code to run the check. They do not define the checks on the node. You define them on the server side, and it's published out to all the machines that have, say, subscription in general, for example, or all the web servers will run the web server check. Now, how do you actually make this stuff go? This is just a limited version. There's a longer version of this that puts all that stuff in the actual repository. But you can see that we're defining that check for NTP and cron. One of them is actually a sensu check. The other is literally a Nagios check from Nagios basic plugins. It uses the same response codes. So if you've got NRPE, this is very similar in the end result to NRPE, except it just returns the data back through RabbitMQ, as opposed to having Nagios call each server and say, you run NRPE for that command, you do this, you do this, you do this. This way it just says, all the web servers, check your HTTP. And they say, oh, okay, fine, we return, and we return zero results. It's great. So log section. It's a centralized logging system, inputs, outputs, filters, and there's a ton of plugins. This is only about half the plugins that it has. I don't know if you guys can read all of that, but it goes on for another page, at least. That's just the ones that are actually in core. There's also a contrib version as well. So there's even more. So once you get the log/server in place, you actually have to give it a config that actually does something, so you know what to do with all the various types of elements and messages that are passed through. Every event could be like a syslog entry, or a log line, or a stack trace or something like that. And it's all sent around through JSON. And so you have to get data into the system. We're actually using log/forwarder for this, which is a small Go program that is compiled and actually in the repos as well, but allows you to send it with SSL and auto resume and some various other niceties. This is actually the profile for setting it up, where I'm basically defining the config file and also including Kibana 3 because I didn't think it needed to be in the actual main module. That actually sets up the Apache vhost and the web server for Kibana. This is actually the config for that stuff you just saw. Basically just accepts port, a couple other things, and sends output to Elasticsearch and also to standard out, just so we can go ahead and see what it is. By the way, if you'd like the slides, they'll be available in a couple days. Most of which we have set. Right now I'm using 12345. It is not the default port, it is just the port that I set right there. There. Both port sides need to know the port, shockingly. I know that comes as a real shock. And then Elasticsearch, Kibana, we're going to show you what Kibana actually looks like so you can actually see some of the events. Zoomed in a bit. So this is actually from the cluster I ran last night. This is mostly just syslog inputs. So you can see up here, just the number of events. This is where I started up. There was a bug, and I actually had connection errors. And so it was logging all these connection errors to syslog. And so when I got it fixed, it sent all of them in and shows you all the actual nodes that were having trouble. And this is a little zoomed in, some of the actual text. I don't think you're going to be able to read it. If you can, sorry. But you can see some of the functionality where you can actually do some quick analysis on the hosts that are sending data in, things like that. So you can actually see over here that the bulk of the data was coming from Logstash itself, actually, from its syslog logs. Now, Jenkins. So, people are familiar with Jenkins? Yes, no? This module, the Modern Infra module, doesn't do anything with Jenkins, turns out, because it's so easy that it wasn't worth it. Mostly because there's another module on the Forge that R. Tyler and I actually helped maintain for Jenkins that does a great job, so there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's code to set up slaves, And again, all outbound communication, not inbound, other than for the slaves themselves. And this, up there, is all you really have to do to get Jenkins installed on the node. So that gives you this. So it really wasn't worth putting in the module when it already works really well. So in order to set up jobs, you have to manually set up jobs. But there are some ways of doing this automatically. They're not as far along in the Jenkins world as it could be for automating and building out jobs automatically. It is a world that's ripe for configuration management and hasn't actually happened yet.
How about for managing plugins?
It does do plugins. It'll do plugins and can do a bunch of slaves and a few other things. So it'll make sure that your system is built the same way every time. Jobs are stored in the Jenkins directory /jobs, and they're XML. So you can actually pretty easily just copy them, put them in version control, and then dump them back in. Or you could automate them and create them automatically if you needed to. There's some work being done on templating job creation and APIs for job creation, but still, the Jenkins mod design is still very much GUI-based at this point for most people, and so it's a little weird. But the XML does work fairly well. If you just drop the XML files onto the system, it works pretty nicely. If you want to talk about it more afterwards, I did talk last year on this stuff too, so. Okay, things this module did not do for you. It doesn't build your puppet master. It doesn't add DNS names for the servers. The cloud formation stacks, on the other hand, do that. And the nice thing is, some of this might make you sleep at night, some of it might make you not sleep at night because you know just what's breaking. Again, my daughter last night sleeping, so. I have some slides on how I built Puppet Master and how I used Puppet Librarian Puppet. I keep wanting to say Puppet Librarian, it's Librarian Puppet. I'm going to skip through them, I think. Do people want to see how to use Librarian Puppet though? Okay. Okay. This is not officially part of the talk, but here you go. Let's take a Puppet file and manage modules and dependencies separately from your code that you may be writing in-house. So like Sheila said, you have a lot of, if you're writing custom modules, but then you have a lot of Forge modules as well, you may want to actually separate the two of them so that you can go ahead and either pull them in from different repos, potentially, and that's how it's actually really designed. I, however, typically have one repo of my local code that I've written, then your profiles, your roles, maybe a few small, tiny local modules that you haven't put into their repos. But then you've got a lot of modules that you're pulling in from the Forge that you really want to keep separate so no one accidentally modifies and that they're refreshed on time and their version and things like that. So I've actually used the pattern of a second directory, in this case like modules-local, that's appended to the module path and lets me go ahead and slowly move from one whole big site where I've just done things with pop module tool and then move to an area where you've got one directory of your modules that are coming from upstream or outside sources, and then you've got one that is actually just the local stuff that your company has written. This is the old school, before 3.6, when they added directory environments, how you define it. And the bottom one is the 3.6 environments.conf file, which is actually the new directory environments that people are seeing in 3.6. This is what a Puppet file looks like. This is actually the Puppet file that would build all the code you need for this talk. This turns into, and the comments, it's very similar, like Sheila said, to Bundler. Actually, if you look at this, you can pretty much see the advanced history here. This, when run by just using Puppet Librarian Puppet install, generates this. All the stuff from here down to here are all installed automatically. These two are local. At this point, you would probably be moving modern infra into this list, because I now published the Forge this morning, but you'd end up with one local directory, one local code base. Really easy, really simple. Don't have to manage all the dependencies, don't have to keep track of versions, and know if you need to modify them and use some local modifications to certain files, you can even do that by doing something like this, where you can actually specify a Git repo and even a reference, like a tag or a branch or something like that. You can do that as well. A couple things to note. One, Nokia, and here is actually part of Nokia. And second, Nokia, this is not what we actually use in Nokia. I started there a couple weeks ago, so this is all done before that. They wanted me to tell you. And more importantly, they're hiring in Boston. Anyone, and also Burlington. Anyone who wants to talk about it is welcome to talk to me. And my contact info was there. And I took way less time than I thought it would, which is great. And I can take questions actually. Oh, and the module, so look at all this code is up there. People want to. So questions. I can also show you the actual system running right now. This is actually Kibana. It works. Right, that. What is it, public last? Wi-Fi password?
Yeah, public last.
All lowercase?
Yeah, all lowercase.
Yeah, it was working before, I just timed out. There we go.
Are you going to questions?
Questions are good, yeah.
Good. I was like, that was impressive. So, round of applause, first of all, for Matthew.
You guys can't actually see this, sorry. Why is no one looking at this? You can't see it.
Nice. Okay. Do you have questions out in the audience? I know you have questions. Yeah, there we go.
Rather than using, or I guess in addition to using Kibana to visualize like a dashboard of these events, could you get, I don't know if any of the tools that you were talking about send alerts?
Yes. So remember how I mentioned those filters? So Logstash is really an event routing system. It can do whatever you want, including, hold on a second, let me pop. Back up the list, the long list. What do you actually use for internal communication? IRC, HipChat, Zulip, anything else? Screen out.
Email or SMS.
Email, SMS, okay, email then, yes. So yes, I actually will do email. I can do, let's see, outputs, Boundary, CloudWatch, CSV, Datadog, Elasticsearch, email, files, Guelph, Ganglia, Graphite, HipChat, IRC, Jira tickets. If you get a stack trace, send it to Jira. Send it directly. I've actually implemented something similar to HipChat, which I actually built one module for Zulip, which was bought by Dropbox. And so it's similar to HipChat, but it actually sent the developers, every time there was a stack trace on a dev instance, it would send the stack trace to their channel. And so they didn't even have to look in Kibana to see what the stack trace was. It just showed up in their actual logs on their screen. And then they could actually just see what the problem was. They hit a 500, see the 500, see the stack trace. They didn't have to go look for it. They also didn't have to pollute their email though, which was also nice. And everyone can go back and look for it. Also, Sensu can do similar things. There's a lot of outputs. I actually set up the handler for email on this setup, but you can send email, you can do IRC, Zulip, HipChat, anything you want. You can send things to metrics from Sensu to Graphite, for example. So you're monitoring things like a MySQL server, but want to make sure that it has, enough RAM or enough, your slave times aren't too high. So you're essentially checking it, managing the actual checks, but then sending that data on to Graphite so you can log it and show it. Logstash can actually send log data also as well. And they can kind of send data back and forth. This is just JSON packet sets. Next question. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, this is the simplistic version of the build out.
Hi. We're just starting out on Amazon and Puppet, so this question might be very noobish, but so are you running the Puppet Master on your local network, or is the Puppet Master also running on AWS?
AWS. I actually can show you. Hold on. So we actually built these with CloudFormation couplets. Use the 362 library and Puppet. Yeah. So I ended up having to set the hostings and then I install Puppet and then basically eliminate the Puppet directory and then pull the Git repo down and drop it into the same place. If you hold on a second, I will show you. Okay? This is not going to be very readable, sorry. But if you look, this is a cloud init script that sets up the entire node, including the hosting. It's in the repo. It's under Cloud Stack. Not the module itself. The module is actually a different repo, but the actual repo, the URL, is called build modern infra. And it has the entire Cloud Stack template for both this and for the nodes. So feel free to look at them to see all.
That brings me to my second question. So, we are, because as a small company and we're looking to at a very constrained budget, we are looking at just having one single stack with JBoss server and a web server and everything. So now, if I have to replicate so many, and can the Puppet Master exist on a single application server, and how bad would it take on the performance?
So running the Puppet Master on the same server you probably wouldn't do. I actually used T1 micros. This Puppet Master is the T1 micro.
Okay.
It could actually use the new T2 micros, and it would be 0.12 cents an hour. I will tell you that the T1 micros are 0.2 cents an hour, and it's 2 cents an hour, sorry. It's 2 cents an hour versus 1.2 cents. Right, that's what it is.
So T1 micro is
2 cents an hour, T1 micro is $14 an hour.
Right, it's enough for the Puppet Master?
It worked for well enough. It might not scale out to a bunch of nodes, but it worked. Here's actually the infra, the stack for the actual infrastructure stuff, which is, this one is right here, is the actual, can y'all read that? Is it big enough? Okay. This is actually the stack for the RabbitMQ server. Again, T1 micro. The Logstash server actually needs, and here you can actually see how I'm doing the graphic reading names for everything. The Logstash server needs a little more RAM, so it needed to be an M1 small, because I wasn't doing this in VPC. You could probably use the T2 smalls, which has enough RAM, I think. And then the Jenkins box is right now an M1, I'm sorry, yeah, an M1 small right now. But it doesn't really need to be that, it could be a T1 micro if you had to. I wouldn't suggest, you can start there if you're using Cloud Stack templates. Really easy to change.
Right.
You've got them under version control. Switch one variable out, poof, you've now got a bigger node. I would recommend not putting them all in one stack. You can run 20 stacks without increasing the limit. You don't want to have to take down all of your nodes just because you want to change one type's size. So separating the nodes may actually be beneficial. It doesn't cost anything per stack. Just remember.
Thank you.
I don't even need the mic. That was on your GitHub, that whole cloud init?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's all.
Cool. The question was, is that on your GitHub? For those who can't hear. Other questions?
It's that. Right there. The actual module from the Forge, so it's modern infra, no dashes, links to this, if I remember correctly. I can verify that for you. Let's just look. Oh, wait, wrong side. Wait, I want to look at Forge. Right there. So it is actually linked off the modern infra module name as well.
Great.
Do you know what some of the differences are in using CloudFormation versus the Puppet cloud provider?
Yes. First of all, the cloud provider provisioner doesn't. First of all, when I tried to set up this stuff originally, the cloud provider didn't work with 3. It was that long ago. There was a couple of month period where it just didn't work with Puppet 3. So I didn't really have much experience with it. CloudFormations has a couple of benefits. First of all, your templates are in version control. You can just put them in Git and then keep them and actually modify them going from there. You also can specify things, a lot more types of resources. You notice I put Mouth3 entries in there. You can put IAM roles. You can put EBS volumes. You can put everything pretty much. It just gives you complete functional access to pretty much the entire set of things they have. And it's effectively the same as the API at some point, except it's all one file, so you don't have to keep track of what you ran to go and replicate it the second time. It really goes back to infrastructure as code at that point. I don't know, it's probably more similar in some ways to using like the GCE module with Puppet to build GCE engine systems. So you can actually, I don't know if the cloud provider will do that for Puppet. I mean, you can get the infrastructure as code, really, puts all the code and can rebuild it that way. Also, you can probably talk to the Puppet folks about it. Go ahead.
Just had a question, like, which AMIs were we using for the CloudFormation?
So I had a mix of Ubuntu 12.04 and 14.04. And I just pulled them up from using that. That's how I found the AMIs, the current versions.
Okay. Because the Cloud Init comes only with the Amazon Linux AMIs, right?
Nope. It comes with, I think, one of the newer, CentOS 7 for sure, but I think even CentOS 6 something comes with Cloud Init. RHEL, some 6 something. Amazon Linux, and Ubuntu. Cloud Init was actually developed by Ubuntu, then taken up by Amazon Linux, and then has now since migrated even all the way into Red Hat mainstream and CentOS.
Okay, but did this AMIs have the Puppet packages already on those?
No.
No,
these are clean AMIs from Ubuntu with that, like I showed.
Okay, how did you get like Puppet on those then?
Right there. Now, could you build the AMIs with something like Packer? Trivially, absolutely. The reason I didn't try this with CentOS is because I didn't want to try and fight getting yes on for the actual for the GPG keys. I didn't have time. I had code around to just do this, so I just did it this way.
We have time for another question. Someone's got one? Let's see, I have a question for Brianna. Is the food ready? Can I release people? Sure. Solid. So, congratulations, it's lunchtime. Another round of applause for Matthew.